and let us all do we can to build a better future. Most notably, Tulsi Gabbard. She recently showed up on Tucker Carlson's show, which now I have to say is A-OK, because guess what? Anna Banana Kasparian went on Ben Shapiro's show. So in other words, nothing to complain about now. So let's hear the words from Tulsi Gabbard in regards towards how this administration wants to continue on this destructive conflict between Russia and Ukraine.
So the war in Ukraine is likely to be a centerpiece of tonight's speech by Joe Biden. What he probably won't mention is that shortly after the war broke out, a war that has basically destroyed the nation of Ukraine he claims to care about, both Ukraine and Russia signified they were open to a negotiated ceasefire. It came very close to it. But apparently the Biden administration prevented that. How do we know? Well, because the former prime minister of Israel, Naftali Bennett, just said the West, meaning the Biden administration, blocked a truce in order to, quote, keep striking Putin. This seems like a huge story from a reliable source. Tulsi Gabbard is a former presidential candidate we thought we'd check in with on this story. Tulsi Gabbard, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks,
so I have no idea why the former prime minister of Israel admitted this in public. I'm so grateful that he did. How can Biden, how can the New York Times, the Washington Post, how can all the cheerleaders for this refuse to acknowledge this fact?
This is huge. We could have prevented this. Our leaders, those in power, could have prevented this, and they didn't. And the fact that it's not being widely reported is incredibly revealing, and it just shows they never really cared about the Ukrainian people. They never really cared about the American people or democracy or freedom, all these other things that we hear them giving so much lip service to.
And here's the real truth of it. Again, a lot of these politicians in Washington, D.C. are getting rich. Before the war started, a lot of these politicians were selling a lot of their shares in the military-industrial complex and with big oil. Before the war started, many of the politicians in the Democratic and Republican Party were buying stocks or selling their shares in regards towards the corporations that will be impacted by the war in Ukraine. And the thing is, well, gee, Kit, what do you mean? They sold their stocks before the war started? How's that possible? Insider information, right? And we've reported on this last year. We talked about this last year. So these politicians don't care about the people of Ukraine or the people of Europe or the people of Russia or the American people. And already, if anyone wants to complain, listen, I understand. I get it. Many people still have absolute trust in their lawmakers in Washington, D.C. Many people can't think beyond the fact that they're being lied to every day by our politicians. And so, unfortunately, many Americans aren't going to be raising an eyebrow due to the fact that billions upon billions of dollars have been wasted in this ridiculous war.
It reveals what they've really wanted all along, which is to overthrow the Putin regime. And they saw this war as an opportunity that would help them achieve that goal. And it's disgusting to know that this is true. The thing is, Tucker, you and I both know with regime change wars, no one can predict how they'll end up or what happens next or who's going to take over. But we do know with Russia, because they've already, the writing is on the wall. We do know that in Russia, it's not going to be some a pro-Western or pro-democracy, power that goes and takes over. It's going to be someone that is far more hawkish and far more dangerous, creating a greater threat for the United States. The only way that this war ends is through a negotiated outcome. So unless something radical changes, something major changes, unfortunately, what we, the American people, will see, what the Ukrainian people see, people in the world, is that this will continue to escalate, pushing us closer to a direct conflict between the United States, NATO, and Russia. And we've talked about where that could potentially lead: more dangerous weapons, more countries involved, and increasing that risk of a potential nuclear war.
It's so reckless and crazy. It's also completely beyond our control that this war for democracy has never involved a referendum. People are not allowed to vote on this. Most people are against it, but because they're so for democracy, they won't allow the vote. But I'm really trying to find, since I think this is going to happen, regardless of what you and I say, how does the U.S. conceivably benefit from this? Is there any benefit that you can see?
Well, we know who is profiting from this. The Biden administration and these pro-war Republicans and Democrats in Congress they've sent over $100 billion of our taxpayer dollars over to fund and escalate this proxy war against Russia through Ukraine. There's a lot of military industrial complex companies that are profiting.
And don't forget all the politicians that, again, did insider trading. Before the war started, before the first shot was fired, a lot of these politicians got the heads up that Russia was going to invade Ukraine. And so you know what all those politicians did? They wanted to save their money. They wanted to protect their assets. And so they started buying and selling shares that would impact their bottom line. You know, something interesting happened in 2021, and it's been reported that many Democratic and Republican lawmakers got really good deals and made some really smart moves in the stock exchange with their own personal shares. You know, it's almost like they were given a little heads up on which way the wind was going to blow on their stocks. And they kept on earning more and more money
off of this. And I know there are a lot of folks, as we've seen in other regime change wars in the past, who are licking their chops, looking at the money that they will make and going in to try to rebuild these war-torn countries. But the people who are losing are the people of Ukraine, the people here in the United States. And if this goes on, there will more and more people be suffering more and more destruction around the world, in Europe and around the world.
Yeah, if Americans supported this, the Pentagon probably wouldn't be having recruitment shortfalls, I would think, just a guess.
Very good point.
Tulsi Gabbard, great to see you. Thank you.
Thank you.
There's many reasons why there's recruitment shortfalls, such as for the fact that veterans are self-deleting themselves, how many veterans who served in the Iraq, Afghanistan wars are being left to fend for themselves. Many veterans are on the streets. So speaking as a veteran, I can say this. There's a lot of people who saw how the United States treated the people who served in Iraq and Afghanistan. And again, those two wars were based on lies, similar to how Ukraine is. Never forget that good old Barack Obama led us from 2 wars to 7. So in other words, this is the United States, the military industrial complex, continuing to, hum along, where you have, again, Democratic and Republican presidents who are more than happy to waste our treasury on wars that could eventually lead to the extinction of the human species. And all these wars haven't been about stability or rebuilding a nation or introducing the people to democracy. It's always been about natural resources, gas, oil, rare earths, minerals, gold, silver, etc., etc., etc. It's all about the dollars to these politicians. And even if there's any kind of talks of peace or ceasefire or ending of the hostilities, always expect any Democratic or Republican presidential administration to do whatever they can to make sure that the said war continues on. Look at how long this ridiculous war in Ukraine is taking place. In all reality, in the real truth, as soon as the first shot was fired, everyone should have demanded for diplomatic talks to continue and to keep on continuing it so that the war can end. But the fact that we have a heartless administration that's more than happy to spend billions of dollars in Ukraine and not on the American people, it should tell you where these politicians' priorities lay. It's about money. It's about profit. It's about power. And if it means the extinction of the human species, they'll be okay. They're going to find their little fancy rich bunkers to hide in while sacrificing the rest of us. It doesn't have to be this way. So shout out to Tulsi Gabbard being on Tucker Carlson's show and saying the truth for what it is. And that is, this is madness. But yet the Biden-Harris administration, and I guess all of their sycophants and supporters, are on board with what? World War III taking place? Great. The survivors will envy the dead.